Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Change podcast where we introduce you to people and ideas shaping the MENA region. Today we'll be talking about the future of marketing and advertising agencies and transformation they need to go through in order to stay relevant. In what ways do agencies need to transform their business? What needs to be addressed in terms of people, processes, revenue streams and structures? What the role of the agency should be going forward, and how a failure to change will put agencies at risk. My guest today is Nourah AlFayez, Head of Digital Transformation at Google. She manages the digital transformation team in the Middle East and North Africa. She consults with advertisers and Big Six agencies on leveraging data and technology in order to transform their marketing strategies and approaches. Prior to Google, Nura worked in management consulting, where she advised companies across various sectors, including telco, media, banking, on their business strategy. Nura, welcome to the Change podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm super glad that you are here. So, how's your week so far?
Good. A very, let's say, stimulating week. A lot of very exciting projects that are trying to, get completed before December.
No, absolutely, and it's nice to hear that things are rolling and things are moving forward, considering what we've been going through for the previous couple of months.
I mean, honestly, from my perspective, I feel like things we're accelerating for us. Obviously, considering what was going on with COVID and the shift online, the move to digital transformation was accelerated. So it was like a catalyst for change. And so a lot of our clients and agencies were scrambling to kind of get on top of things as much as they possibly can. From our perspective, we just had to figure out how to continue what we do virtually. Some things were quite challenging, but surprisingly, a lot of things we were able to manage quite well. And actually, I would say we're probably more efficient than we've ever been. I don't know what impact that has on our well-being, but in general, it's been a very productive few months.
So far, so good. And what are your plans at Google? Are you guys staying at home till the end of the year? What about 2021?
I mean, honestly, we're still figuring it out. Most likely, we are working from home till the end of year. And then next year, we're still figuring out the best way forward. But yeah, I think it's the same everywhere. We're trying our best to figure out a way to allow some people to go to the office, at least for some meetings, but doing it in a way where we're completely safe and we're able to, wear masks in meeting rooms. I think they've already set up the office in a way that, protects people with different dividers and things like that. There are limits to the number of people that can be in the office. Right now, not hardly anyone is there. I think it's mostly like the facilities teams are there, and our security team is there. But there are some people who are going in for meetings and things like that, but it's very rare. I anticipate that now with the vaccine, but then again, I don't know how long it'll take till it rolls out here. Things will definitely gradually get better. But I think in general, this is my opinion, so it's not like a Google opinion, but I think in general, there's going to be a shift to not working from the office every day. I think a lot of companies are seeing that this is not necessary. So I do think it'll be the same for us in figuring out, when it makes sense and when it doesn't make sense, and giving people that flexibility. We already honestly had that flexibility. But then being in the offices, being with your colleagues, being able to bounce off ideas from people just randomly. I notice now, for example, if someone wants to ask you a question, they schedule a 30-minute meeting to ask one question, and then they take up the whole time of that meeting because they've scheduled it. Whereas like in the past, it was a little bit, you can just pass by someone's desk and quickly informally ask them something. So these things we miss,
Yeah, I'm sure. And I think we're all learning. It's new for everyone. And I agree that this definitely accelerated some of the, ways of how we operate and how we used to work, and challenge some of the things that we were just taking for granted for the previous couple of decades. So I'm curious to see how things will develop in 2021. So before we deep dive into our topic that I'm extremely excited to talk about, because not only podcasts, but not a lot of publicly communicated medias are talking about agencies, because usually agencies are the one talking. So very rarely there is someone talking about their transformation, So I'm really excited to talk about that. But before we get into the topic, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions and share your story of coming to UAE. So as the podcast is introducing people and ideas shaping the MENA region, it's always interesting to learn the stories behind individuals working in this country. So can you tell us a bit more about your journey to UAE?
Yeah, I think that, so I moved to Dubai in 2008. Prior to that, I was in management consulting. I was working in KPMG in Bahrain. And I remember looking to join like a consultancy, and I had applied to a bunch, and the one I ended up deciding to join was Oliver Wyman in Dubai. So I moved to Dubai to join Oliver Wyman Consulting, and that was 2008. And then I had heard that Google was looking to hire, and that time like the Google office was tiny. I think I was the eighth person to join Google. So that was 10 years ago. And it was super scrappy. It was really nice. It was like a small family. We didn't even have like a receptionist, so we were taking turns answering the door. We used to physically go to the supermarket one of us used to go to the supermarket and buy the snacks for the office, and then we'd help him unload and put things away. So it was a really startup kind of feel back then. And now we're like I think around 170 people. So we have grown a significant amount. But yeah, so that's basically the story. Once I joined Google, that was it. I have been there for 10 years now, and I haven't gone anywhere else.
But it's interesting. I mean, a lot of people are always curious to see, and to hear about experiences working for Google. Google has been always on the map of, the coolest companies to work for. Can you, and I'm also curious to understand the difference between the Google in 2008 when you joined and 8 of us and the Google now. But can you tell us a bit more, what is like working for a company such as Google today?
I mean, honestly, especially during the COVID times, like you're really, really grateful to work for such a company that really cares about their people and puts their people's needs first. And that's really what we experienced during COVID, like a lot of outreach around our well-being, a lot of flexibility around, working from home, but also like taking time off, taking mental health days and things like that. So it really honestly made a lot of us really appreciate working for Google. Honestly, I would say the most difficult thing about working from Google is it's difficult to then leave, because you get so used to working there. It's such a comfortable place to work. There's so many opportunities. And you're surrounded by very smart people. And you have this like ability to just run with a project. You have an initiative and you can just run with it. And I haven't seen that elsewhere. So that's also because it's quite, it's not as hierarchical. Well, it is hierarchical, but it's not like, bureaucratic, let's say. So you have the ability to kind of, have that innovation built in. And I think that's something that's very important that we try to export to some of our partners, this kind of, ability to be creative, be innovative, and be flexible and nimble. So it's a great place to work. I don't know if this will answer your question, like from a benefits and let's say perks, it's a great place. From a learning and constant learning, like there's always this drive to educate the teams and push us to strive to learn more and more. And also the technology is constantly evolving, so you anyway have to keep up with it. So it's a very enriching kind of place to work. In terms of how it's different, definitely now we're much more established than we were when we first started. It's like when I started at Google, it really felt like a startup. And to the extent that it was a bit chaotic, I came from consulting where things are really organized and structured, and then you go to Google and it was like a little bit of chaos when you first join. Now I think we're much more structured. It's like the vision for the region is much clearer than probably it's ever been. And then we have all the functions now, because previously, we were mainly a sales team. We had a couple of guys on marketing. I think we have one person on PR, and that was pretty much it. But now we have a thriving cloud team, for example. We have a very it's well-established huge marketing team now compared to like 2 people. And we also have the channel sales, all the partnership managers that are set up here with covering different aspects of our ecosystem. And of course, we have a big sales team compared to 8 people, or I think we were 6 people at the time. So definitely, it's a very different world. I still think it's we still have excellent talents. You're still working with incredibly clever people. We are getting more and more diverse. So as our office kind of developed, we started attracting people from other offices. So we have people who used to be in the Paris office or the Dublin office or Mountain View. So we became an attractive office for people to move to. And so we ended up having a lot more diversity, which is great. What else? I think, and we're constantly evolving as well. So Like, soon you'll see. I can't say too much about it, but soon we're going to have an interesting space as well, hopefully. So yeah, I would say that's kind of how it's definitely evolved. I would also say, when I first joined, I feel like our approach was a lot about sales, right? It was very much focused on selling media. That's pretty much what we did. But then over the years, I think our approach is much more long-term on the ecosystem and the market. So how do we help the market grow? How do we evolve the market? How do we help our partners grow and enrich the ecosystem so that it becomes a self-sustaining ecosystem? And I think that's what's making the work we do now much more interesting. We're much more involved with the actual markets we're in and working on helping them as markets, and we've done a lot of initiatives with our marketing team around helping small businesses, projects like Maharat, which are helping people get access to education on technology and the internet. So I think that and even all the work on YouTube, I don't want to forget that. I'm working with YouTube and content creators. So I think we do a lot more work now in terms of enriching the region. Of course, we were small. We couldn't do so much in this space before. And this is what makes working for Google also very rewarding, being from the region. So I really appreciate that.
So whoever wondered and how is working for Google and maybe dreaming about working for Google now is even more hooked to the idea. So if you're for anyone who wants to join Google, what would be a couple of advices that you want to give them? Someone applying for a job at Google.
Oh, well, it depends on the role, right? It really depends.
When you're preparing for any job interview, there are always these Google questions that you go through, and that you want to check out. Notorious for having tricky questions.
Honestly, we actually we don't do the kind of brain teasers anymore. We're advised against doing those. Personally, when I interview, I like to create scenarios for the candidate and see how they would handle themselves in that scenario. To make it more, I don't know, realistic, at least for me. It depends, and that's the thing, it depends on the interviewer, it depends on the role. I would say it is very difficult to get into Google, it's true. But I think we take a balance of capabilities and expertise, and a cultural fit is very important as well. I don't know what advice to give, honestly. The advice I usually give is for people who want individual roles, and that's, I can give much more concrete guidance because it really varies. But I can talk from what we call Googliness, or from a cultural perspective. And so these are, this is where you look for people who are, team players, who are creative, who are curious. I always say curious minds for me. Having a curious mind is a super important thing, and you can notice that in an interview quite easily. An inquisitive mind, let's say. And then also in terms of, how you would help you, let's say, and how you'd work with your colleagues and how you'd help your colleagues, and having a passion as well for technology, having a passion for your market, having a passion for certain products. Like, this is something I look for as well. Did I say creative thinking? So creative thinking, structured thinking, and problem-solving skills is something that we also look for a lot, and strategic thinking. So these are kind of the competencies, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a good hint. It's a good hint. Okay, so getting into the topic of agency transformations, all right? So your current role with Google is head of digital transformation, but with this specific focus to agencies and collaboration with agencies in their transformation. Can you tell us a bit more about your role and the whole program that you're running?
So basically, I've been working with agencies. Actually, maybe I could get a little bit of background. So I've been with Google for 10 years. For the first, 2.5 years, I was working on Google Ads, or what used to be called AdWords. And then I shifted to the DoubleClick team. So DoubleClick was actually a company we acquired back in 2006, and it was mainly an ad server. But under the DoubleClick brand, we built out a suite of products that are enterprise level, let's say, marketing automation products, end to end, from creation of the creative all the way to measurement. And so when I was working in that team, as you can imagine, predominantly our client base were agencies, not advertisers. So 80% of our clients were agencies, because it's quite sophisticated, the technology. And so that's where my relationship with agencies started. And the other thing is with marketing automation technology, or marketing technology more generally, and also I would say even analytical or measurement technology. This opens up a lot of doors for the agencies to really start exploring or transforming what they do. So it started out with just helping specific specialized teams with learning how to use that technology, to sort of over time realizing that this should be kind of an operating system for the agencies to build out new revenue streams and new businesses and move away from traditional media business, which is like making margins off of media, which of course is still the case to a large extent. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to shift the agencies away from just having one kind of revenue stream around that, and also in terms of like having retainers that bundle in a lot of very valuable work and undervalues that work, and moving to more structured kind of menu of services around very sophisticated technological implementations, analytics, and also media executions, but media executions at a more advanced and sophisticated level. So I would say like around 2017, I started approaching my agencies with sort of a narrative around how do you transform your agency, and not from from our tech only perspective or from media perspective, but more generally. We talked about things around structure, we talked about talent, we talked about processes and process automation and things like that, and giving them just some concepts around what they need to start considering from a transformational perspective. And since then, we have been working on various projects with some of our big six in terms of transforming their business model or introducing new business models into the equation, and working across cross-functionally, even within the agency cross-functionally, to kind of make this happen. Because one of the reasons why you reached out to me is sort of this white paper that we published around agency transformation or post-COVID. But honestly, a lot of it is what really needs to already be happening in the agencies, but the agencies are struggling a lot to put those changes into place. And I think, there's various reasons why. One is, of course, talent and finding the right talent, or being able to upskill the right talent quick enough. And then two is just also from a leadership perspective, is understanding where to focus your efforts from a transformational perspective. What are the areas you should be building out? Where's the space you should be playing in? And then also from the sorry, I forgot, lost train of thought. Talent people. There was one more. Why am I drawing a blank? Oh yes. So the last piece is actually quite critical, which is around the positioning. So in the minds of the advertisers, and historically speaking, advertisers think of efficiency and cost efficiency. And so they go to their agencies to get them the cost efficiency from a media buying perspective. But now, at the end of the day, the agencies can bring so much more value than simply cost efficiency. But when you talk to, when an agency speaks to a procurement team at an advertiser, that's all they're talking about, is trying to get the cost down as much as possible. And in the process, diluting the value by so much. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the services around analytics and measurement are then bundled into a retainer. And if you don't have the budget to then hire the right people to deliver quality work, you end up doing kind of the basic kind of work you can do to meet the cost requirements. And that's another challenge for agencies, is the advertisers need to change their approach, and they need to also change how they view agencies, and view them more as partners who own business goals, and not simply agencies who own media goals.
Okay, that makes sense. I think we touched a lot of different topics now, so I'm going to try to kind of structure us by just summarizing. So your current role basically is, in simple words, now your 5 minutes of your talk I'm going to tell in one sentence, and you tell me if I got it right. But you are working closely with big agencies to make them future ready and to make their business models relevant for the future that is coming, right? And if we really simplify it.
Yes, if you simplify it, yes, definitely.
Yeah,
sorry.
And we're going to talk about the details now that I really want to, but I want to make sure that that everyone who is listening gets the message across and really understand the whole structure. Some of them will probably be completely familiar with the topic, but for some of them will be new. And when you put Google in the perspective, just to again clarify, why is this important for Google?
So I would say it's important for Google in two key ways. One is we only grow when the ecosystem evolves, and agencies are one of the key players in that ecosystem, and so they need to evolve so that we can evolve, which kind of touches on my second point, which is we are not built to service our advertisers, right? We don't have an enormous workforce that is supposed to go do implementation work. We're not. That's not our strategy. That's not what we're here in the market for. So we need to scale and be able to scale across markets. MENA is a huge region, so scaling across markets, but also we have big advertisers that we work with that require quite sophisticated work right now. And honestly, in many cases, we don't have partners that are capable of servicing those needs. So we need to get our partners up to the right level to be able to deliver effectively. So yeah, it's not a completely altruistic, let's say.
Yeah, I understand. So basically, for what you guys at Google are providing when it comes to technology, agencies are not really using the most out of it to service the advertisers, right? They could do a lot more, if that's. Yeah.
Yes, I mean they utilize the tech, but in most cases I would say they utilize it at a basic level, and there's so much more value that can come out of it. Don't get me wrong, of course there are partners and agencies that are doing an amazing job. I'm just generalizing.
No, of course. No, we're not talking about any specific agency. We're talking about general the industry. So we had a couple of previous episodes. We talk about the insurance in general. Obviously, there are some insurers who are doing a great job, but the majority are not really progressing. But when we're talking about the agencies, I think that over the years, a small group of agencies grew to a size of they became corporates. They became the clients that they were servicing before they became so big. And for them, transformation is equally challenging as for any other big organization, right? When it comes to people, processes, structure, and so on. What are in the current model, how most of them operate? What are the biggest threats? What are the biggest problems that they are facing?
So one you kind of touched on by saying they've become so large, let's say, and so by nature, because they are quite large organizations, they're not able to be super nimble. Decisions have to go up and down the command chain. Also, in a lot of cases, they're publicly owned, so it's also a matter of getting global teams to approve changes locally. And if they don't feel like those changes are going to hit the bottom line in the short term, then it becomes a bit more difficult for them to make those changes. So I would say one is just the nature of being such a large organization. Secondly, I would say is silos. And unfortunately, the way they operate in a lot of cases is very, very siloed. You have the ad ops team that operate quite separately from the trader or the trading desk and the traders. You have it quite separate sometimes from the search teams. And then you also then have a separation with the account teams, who are the ones that understand the client business and understand the client's challenges. And then they do a project management kind of job where they break down whatever they're trying to do and then distribute the tasks, let's say, to each of these teams. And then what ends up happening is you have like a business goal, let's say, or in most cases it's a marketing goal that they're trying to tackle, then translated into media-related KPIs, then in some cases conflict with each other from one team to the other. Sometimes these teams don't even speak to each other. So, like I remember once we had done a session with an agency where we put everyone who works on a particular client in a room, and some of them had never met before. And then we discovered that one team is optimizing against one KPI and another team was optimizing against a completely different KPI. So silos is a big problem. It's not something super easily solvable because of the size. So going back to the first point, there are ways around it in terms of instituting collaborative measures to ensure there is greater collaboration. There are ways structurally to address it. We see some agencies that, for example, put their traders within the account teams and decentralize their trading desks to try to bring the traders a bit closer to the client problem. But then you also have the issue with the leadership of those agencies or opcos that don't know that much about tech. So then they don't know how to guide or direct those kinds of technological, people, technological oriented staff. And so then they end up not kind of, let's say, progressing or doing what they should be doing in some cases. So silos is, I'm not saying I know the answer. It is a problem. Sometimes technology allows you to surpass this problem by bringing people together with collaborative tools. Sometimes the technology, like, let's say, necessitates bringing people together. I think one thing is, no matter how you're structured, if you are trying to solve a client problem or you're trying to prepare even a brief, bringing everyone involved together to discuss and decide is something as simple as that can also go a long way to making sure everyone's close to the client context. And so silos is one of the things. The third thing I would say is operations. So there's a significant amount of inefficiencies within agency operations from a workflow perspective, from a billing perspective, from a reporting perspective, that ends up taking a huge chunk of like a planner or agency executive's time that could be spent on much more valuable work. And so this is a huge drain. When you go to them and you say, on top of all this that you're trying to manage day-to-day, here, we need you guys to learn X, Y, and Z, and we need you also to engage in more cross-functional conversations so that you can have a better solution articulated for your client. Of course, they're going to be struggling because already they're stretched, honestly, to the breaking point. So I'd say operations, and then I would say leadership in some cases. If leadership is not bought into the idea that they have to change, and also educates themselves enough to understand the strategic decisions that they need to make and how to drive that through the organization, then it's never going to happen. And that is the case in some agencies. And then I would say culture or culture change, because this requires a culture change. It's not simply saying, okay, now we're going to do things this way and everyone get in line. It's not that simple. You need to spend a lot of time to actually convince, to have a communication strategy. You might even need to change incentive schemes for people, change benefits, give them a different kind of flexibility with working so that they can prioritize learning and development. So yeah, definitely culture would be another challenge, and I think that's one of the most difficult things to change, and it's probably the most overlooked. So those are the main challenges, I would say.
So far we said...
and then, one very important one is talent. So this is a very, very important one. I think actually this is the most critical one.
All right.
Because in order to transform, you need to start offering services around analytics, around data, around technology. You need a very different skill set to do this. But what agencies do and continue to do is they hire from other agencies. So you walk into one agency one day and you see someone you saw in a different agency the previous day. So this is pretty much what is happening from a recruitment strategy perspective, and it's really wrong because the typical profile of like a marketing background is no longer relevant. Now the focus is much more on customer experiences, right? So even marketing is dying as a concept, and the shift is much more to customer experiences and crafting those customer experiences to have a one-to-one relationship with your customers. And to do that, you need to really understand technology, and you really need to understand data, and even things like statistics and mathematics are important, right? Correlation analysis, regression analysis. You're doing a lot more of this to understand. Now we're also seeing, advertisers that are moving into the space of propensity modeling and understanding future trends and how do we actually predict what our customers will do in the next, cycle. So that's how sophisticated it's getting. Meanwhile, the backgrounds that you're hiring at agencies in general don't have that skill set. So even I was very recently, I saw a recruiter post something on LinkedIn looking for roles within a media agency. And the first 2 points were like previous experience in an agency, and also like these are the kinds of clients we want you to have experience in. And this is so wrong, because actually we should be looking at very different sectors to get this talent that we need. We need to look at the tech sector. We need to look at data-related fields, maybe financial services, maybe management consulting. I know it's difficult to attract them, so this goes back to culture, and if you create the environment to attract these kinds of talent. But we need to completely change the talent profile we're looking at. And we need to have recruiters that understand this and can work in this way. And I know it's difficult. Attracting the right talent is difficult in every sector. But this is something that we need to start seeing. And I'm starting to see it, by the way, in some of the big six that are starting to hire people with tech backgrounds and people with who come from the tech consulting background. So you're seeing it a little by little. They are difficult to attract. So I totally understand that perspective. But then when you see these kinds of posts, you're like, okay, so the recruiters are still looking for the wrong profiles, and it's a bit worrying, honestly. I would say talent is the basis on which they can completely shift and transform what they're doing. And you can do it from a long-term perspective as well. So you definitely need leadership, people in leadership roles or middle management roles that have the right profile. But you could also start kind of building a pipeline of people by getting fresh grads who have majors in data science, in mathematics, in engineering, and then slowly cultivate these people over the years. And by the way, this is what the more specialized firms seem to do, like the Merkels and the Jellyfishes of the world. This is kind of what they do, is they have a pipeline of junior people who are really being molded from the very beginning. So yeah, this is, I would say, I hope I can keep going forever on the challenges, but those I think are the main challenges.
No. Yeah, I know. I mean, this is amazing. So just to summarize, so far we mentioned six. So we said size, silos, operations, leadership, culture, and talent, and then you emphasize on the talent. So when you are now working with the agencies, consulting them, giving them advisory on how to transform or where to head, where do you start? How do you where do you start the conversation with them?
It's very different depending on the agency.
Okay.
So the usual path we had gone through in the past is we first of all prioritize which agencies to go to. So we chose the agencies where we felt there was a sense, at least a readiness, or at least we believed there would be a C-level buy-in. Because without that, you're going to get nowhere.
Which is the number one. So we would say that then we would say that the leadership is the number one issue to be approached, to get the leadership buy-in, so they can then communicate the strategy through the whole organization, right?
I mean, honestly, I would say it's true even for advertisers, because if you get the C-level buy-in, that really opens the door to them. Of course, there are other challenges you might face. You might have, department heads, or in this case, you might have opco heads that aren't bought in, which is okay. But if you don't have the holdco C-level convinced, then you can't get anywhere. So it's a non-starter in that case.
And how do you get them convinced? How do you do it?
So we had an education program for the agency C-levels, where we would, first we'd go through an overall narrative around why there's an imperative for transformation. And then we had a series of other trainings where we tried to give them just enough knowledge around tech and data to understand where the opportunities are and how to drive it in their organization. Of course, we didn't do this with all of the agencies. We did where we saw that there was traction.
All right. Okay, I see. And so going forward, how do you describe? Okay, some of the strategies for transformation starts from, let's paint the image of where we need to be down the road in 10 years, and then we'll figure out a way how to get there. So how would you describe the agency in the future, or the agency going forward? What's their role in the whole ecosystem?
So I see them more as consultants. And you're also seeing some management consultancies that are moving into the space, which is worrying, because it's very easy to learn the agency business. It's easy to learn the media business. What's more difficult is to have people who have the right, way of thinking, who are, problem solvers, who are strategic thinkers. Those people then can learn anything. So now we're seeing, Accenture and, Deloitte in some markets, McKinsey to a certain extent moving into the space. But that's actually kind of how I see the big six agencies, is becoming much more consultative, and being much more owners of, and this is that's also my aspiration. I hope this will happen as well. I can't predict it will, but owning business goals. So having kind of the ear of the CEO and not just the CMO anymore, and trying to they have access as an agency. You have access and understanding of the client's business to such a great extent, because you have so much data. Right, all these campaigns you've been running for years tells you so much about the consumers that then you can derive insights from, that then should enrich the marketing strategy and the business strategy of an organization. And this is not really happening because even in the view of the advertiser, it's quite siloed. But if advertisers were to change their perspective, I think that agencies would be very powerful partners of theirs from a consulting perspective, to consult with them on making sense of the tech that they're using and what tech they should be using to get their goals or achieve their goals, deriving insights from all of their activities that then constantly and in real time can enrich what they're doing. And then also facilitating, opportunities for them with providers, with publishers, should have the overall picture and should be able to bring in or orchestrate all the different players to deliver against business goals. So this is the ideal scenario. Of course, if we're thinking about TV is always going to be a part of the agency business. In a lot of cases, like if an advertiser is a big TV buyer, they are going to be with a big six because that's where they have the best, costs or the lowest costs.
But do you think that TV will really be relevant in down the road in a couple of years?
I'm personally, I do believe in TV, but I think what's really going to change is TV is going to become much more technologically driven. We're already seeing this in some other markets with programmatic TV, because the challenge in our region is we don't have data. So enriching buys with data, it becomes tricky. And we also anyway don't have a proper measurement system for TV in our region. So there's no people meters, or there's something coming in Saudi, I think, but it's still, I don't know if that's actually going to ever materialize or materialize anytime soon. So in general, I would say that I don't see TV necessarily going away, but I think it's going to be much more digital. And once we're able to enrich the TV buys with data, then that becomes even more powerful. So the channel, definitely it's there. Now, in terms of buying TV, there could be a democratization of TV buying with the digitization of TV content. So or broadcasting content. So if, and this is just me like predicting, but like if more and more TV content becomes digitally available for buying, which by the way, it's very difficult to do right now because each broadcaster has a very different setup. So putting that content or the inventory onto programmatic platforms for buying is not as simple as you think. But let's say we reach a stage where it is simplified and it's much more programmatically bought. So you're buying TV in real time based on your needs and so on. So buying TV will become much more efficient. Then algorithms come and play a part so that you're actually buying the spots that really make the most sense for your brand without any guesswork or focus groups or analysis. So it would be like a utopia of, like, let's say TV buying. But then I don't know, when that happens, what's the role of the agency? So that's why it becomes important. So if that becomes how TV is bought, then agencies definitely need to be much more tech-driven, much more data-driven, because that's how you end up executing TV buys. Then I don't know how much upfronts will play a part. I don't know. I'm really speculating. I can't say I have the answers. But like if let's say we reach a stage many years down the line where TV is bought in this way, I don't know to what extent upfronts and these like annual deals are going to be still in place. And even now with COVID, I think TV worked out really well because everyone was stuck at home, so TV did well. I mean, I think overall the advertising budgets declined across the board, but I don't think TV suffered like outdoor did. But in general, I think like the way you watch or the way you consume content is changing. So
absolutely,
even when I'm calling TV. TV is not the TV set in your living room. The TV could be your laptop, it could be your phone, more and more your phone. It could be so many different things that we can still call it TV because it's TV content. But then how you distribute that content is what's changing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And maybe even sitting in Dubai isn't really giving us the right perspective on how TV plays an important role in other people's lives across other markets. We are here completely plugged into digital, into our devices, and we are recording this podcast for ourselves, and then we are listening to other podcasts, and we're kind of we are picking our own set of medias that we are going to follow, kind of tailoring the medias that we are going to follow. And as a good colleague of mine would say, every company will become a media company. It's just a matter of time, and every company needs to be a media company. And I think that this your opinion theory around TV might be plausible as well. So we'll see. 5 years down the road, we're going to record the episode again and just see if your predictions were accurate. But I want to bring us back to the topic, and I think it's interesting when you said that marketing and the agencies overall, especially marketing advertising agencies, as they are progressing, they're becoming bigger and bigger. They have to take the role of more of a business consultant, right? And it's, if you look at the history of the bigger agencies or on any other company that started either technology or marketing or pure business consulting, as they grew, as they were taking a bigger and bigger role within their clients, they had to take the responsibility for the other two, marketing and technology. So the only way for them to keep their position with their clients was to embrace technology and to embrace business consulting, right? So And then you could see mergers and acquisition happening where marketing agencies are acquiring smaller technology companies or digital agencies. They were blending together, but then that made them big, right? And that made them slow to adapt to future changes, right? So, but I would agree that typical marketing setup, marketing agency without technology cannot survive, right?
Of course. I mean, now, like I was saying, like the concept of marketing, I don't know if it exists in it, or will be existing in the kind of version of it that we think it is now. So, yes, there's definitely a merger. We're even seeing this with advertisers, by the way, because you have the IT departments, then you have marketing departments. But at the end of the day, marketing is using a lot of technology, using more technology than maybe other departments.
Yeah.
So it is quite merged. And like I was saying, like if we're thinking about like customer experiences, then that's impossible to do this without technology. Not to mention now you have the kind of this move towards e-commerce. In a lot of cases, like acceleration over, like this year, there was an acceleration of the shift to the e-commerce and direct-to-customer setups for some brands. So when you do that, it also becomes tricky because then where do you draw the line between marketing and sales? But at the end of the day, your digital channel is also like a sales channel to a certain extent. I know for airlines, they do view it to a certain extent this way. So that becomes another tricky thing. So, what's the role of marketing and what's the role of sales and what's the role of IT? There's a lot of convergence between these departments.
It's hard to, sometimes it's even hard to differentiate them and to have them work separately, separate groups. So we mentioned that in our preparation for the podcast when we talk about the hybrid agencies. That's actually how we can call them as well, or the agency of the future would be a hybrid between tech, digital, marketing, creative, and business consulting agency. That's something that probably the market needs more and more in the future, and that's where especially smaller agencies who are growing should be, because for them it's easier to adapt, right? When you're already a huge multinational agency with hundreds of offices around the world, making a change of that kind is not that easy. So you have salaries to pay, you have expenses to cover, so you need to keep, you're kind of in this catch where you need to keep closing deals of a similar kind to survive. So that's a catch. Now how do they embrace change, right? like a big corporations or around the world, hundreds of thousands of employees, right? It's a hard task.
It is. It's very difficult, and it also involves a lot of difficult choices that need to be made. I do think they suffered a lot during the COVID period, and I also see that there are trends towards like a one holdco approach. So you have like the one Publicis approach, or you have the one Group M approach where they go to pitches as one group. Because that's the thing, like this proliferation of little like brands or smaller brands, they're not little. They came up because to avoid issues with competition between brands within the same sector and things like that. But that's becoming less and less relevant. At least that's what we're seeing. And like now we're seeing some groups go together, kind of let's say orchestrate across all of their sisters networks and things like that to come up with one approach or one solution for our clients. So that might keep them big, but it might allow for greater, let's say, collaboration cross-functionally. So that's what I was saying. Structurally, making big structural changes is difficult. But going back to your point about acquisition, so yeah, definitely we're seeing a lot of acquisitions in the space. I think in 2021 it might not be as easy without they're not going to have as much cash flow to do that and make those changes. But why are those acquisitions happening? Those acquisitions are happening because they're acquiring talent. They're acquiring the right skill set that they don't currently have in the agency. And what we think, or at least what I think, is that within the agency group, you could still change without necessarily structurally changing if you actually change sort of the talent and the profiles of the people that you have. So you could kind of continue to do what you do, but do it better if you have the right skill sets in place. So for example, why are these specialized firms so good? Because they're small, but also because up to the level of the highest leadership, they understand the tech, they understand the problem, and they have their finger on the pulse, and they can act on data. Whereas what we're seeing with the big six is it's not so much the case across the board. And then if leadership don't understand tech and data, then how can they challenge their teams or ask their teams the right questions? So this is the other challenge. So not really answering your question because I don't know. Honestly, it is something I can't tell you. We figured it out. We know how a huge agency group can transform. But one is talent, and these acquisitions allow an injection of talent. If you're clever and you're able to disseminate knowledge from these entities that you've acquired across the organization in some way. So there's some people that you're going to be able to upskill. There's some people that are just never going to be able to do what they need to do.
And that's the question that I wanted to ask you. That's a question that I wanted to ask you because a lot of larger companies around the world are now in the process of, especially now after COVID and during COVID, the process of upskilling and upskilling their workforce, and the question is now, what is easier to upskill them or to replace the talent? And as an example that you gave, that HR is publishing, a typical job ad where they're asking a marketing experience. What kind of experience from 20 years ago, or when someone is applying for a job and offered in a digital or in today's era, and then they say, experienced marketing executive, in which era? Experienced in the 2000s or experienced in 2020s? So I think that's a big question. Strategically, what to go for, upskilling versus replacing?
I mean, it really depends. It depends. I think if from a recruitment perspective, or not even from a talent management perspective, if you really understand what are the skill sets you need, and you're also able to probe, because a lot of people are great on paper, and then you meet them and you ask them high level questions and they handle it really well and you hire them, and then you don't realize that they can't do what you need them to do till they're actually doing it or not doing it, let's say.
Especially in this industry.
Also, yes, exactly. Because if you're in an ad agency, you're good at selling and you're good at selling yourself. So I think it's also being able to probe, and even the interview process, or let's say the assessment process, the talent assessment process, needs to be more rigorous so that you can understand. And then also even the conducting governance on accounts of the people. So you can say, okay, so you get the tech, but why aren't you adopting X, Y, and Z features, or why aren't you doing this and that? So being a bit more rigorous in this process. Now, in terms of upskilling versus hiring, I would say doing this assessment to understand, who has what skills, and putting people in the right roles for their skill sets. But then in that case, I think some people definitely, there is let's say a hunger, there's an interest to develop and to learn. And I've seen it many times. Very smart people can really learn anything. And so those are the people that can be upskilled. But there are some people that are, set in their ways, or maybe their background is just is not really like the type of background that's going to be able to absorb this information. And so either finding something for them that makes more sense, or I don't know, honestly. But yeah, basically those are.
You know what? I had an interesting episode, and that was with Mr. Nourah. He works with Cognizant, and he consults people on their mentor them on the professional careers. And then he was talking about how important it is for individuals to be smart about next moves that they are making, and to be smart how they're upskilling themselves. So we spend a lot of time, and probably you spend your whole work day talking to agencies and trying to transform agencies, while on the other side, the workforce that works for these agencies, they should be addressed as well. Because if an average marketing executive is not thinking about upskilling and being relevant in the next 5 years, they will be in a tough place, right? So if we manage to send across the message to people working in these ecosystems and agencies and in marketing as an industry, I think that would be a success as well, because that is important. To be ready for what is coming, to be ready for the new age of marketing and advertising.
Yeah, I think honestly, there's a lot of them are so overwhelmed and very busy that they're not really thinking about this. So I don't want to be too harsh. I definitely think they should be thinking about their careers. They should be thinking, they should have a forward, looking perspective. And I've seen many people in agencies who are excellent and have thought that. And then the other challenge, which I didn't touch on for agencies, is then they go to other companies or they go to tech firms. And so the agency then loses that talent, because a lot of times their best talent, or the ones they upskill as well, end up leaving. So that's another challenge. It's also, how do you make sure you retain the good talent and you have an environment that appeals to them, that rewards them, that celebrates their successes, and so that they stay. Now, in terms of like, let's say, encouraging people to take their career into their own hands. I mean, I can't stress this enough. Like, even if you don't see your future in an agency, these are skill sets you need for many other fields. And every sector is moving much more towards like data and tech, utilization. Not to mention cloud and AI and AR and all these things that are upcoming as well. I mean, cloud's not upcoming; it's something that's very real and is important to know more about from now. But I think, depending on what they want to do with their careers long term. Like, for example, if you're someone who's interested in marketing and this is just what you want to do, it's unfortunate because marketing is not what marketing used to be, and it will never be again. So that's where you need to think, okay, then maybe I'd like to do something else. But otherwise, like, why not embrace something that really enriches marketing and makes marketing something much more sophisticated? But yeah, I would say, I would say definitely a piece of it is you taking responsibility for your career and understanding why your upskilling is something that you need to invest in. But just to be fair to them, I also know that they're really overworked and very stressed.
That's the tricky part about the industry, because whoever worked in that industry or whoever knows as a friend in that industry don't know how difficult it is, and that's not a 9-to-5 job. That's a round-the-clock job, and there's no really. It's always under a lot of stress. There are deadlines, deliveries, clients that are not happy, that are very rarely happy, So it's a difficult place to be. And then yes, absolutely, not to be harsh, but just to raise the awareness and to encourage. Especially when you spend most of your time surrounded by people who have the same point of view and the same opinion, it's hard for you as well to get a different perspective. So sometimes it's also good to give someone a nudge and just give them another perspective just to think about it. And that's not going just for that industry. It goes for any other industry, any other career. You should be thinking about next 5 to 10 years and what is going to be relevant, and start preparing for the future on time. Because if we start similar like COVID, who, let's say, predicted that something like this can happen, they scored a major win when it actually happened. But majority of people woke up when this happened, and it was already too late. Yes, now everyone is thinking about, doing remote work and having conference calls, but now it's going to take us some time to adjust to this. So I think that this is a really big topic, and I think it's hard for a first conversation that we're having to deep dive into any of these areas and actually give some answers. But I'm glad that we started the conversation and that we at least raised some awareness about it. And I'm sure that whoever listened will resonate with some of the things that we said. Some of the things will be challenged, and we're welcoming those challenges in the comments so that we can continue the debate. So to conclude, what do you think would failure to change mean to the agencies?
Look, honestly, it depends. I think in the, let's say, medium term, failure to change will mean they'll lose opportunities for, sort of analytics, consulting, measurement consulting, cloud-based solutions, these kind of implementations that they could be doing. Basically, tech and data consulting opportunities will more and more go to the firms that can do it and do it well, right? And then, of course, you have the management consultings that are ramping up, who are ramping up and trying to move into the space. And that's the piece of the business they're going to lose out on. Now, in the medium term, it's like they're still going to have business, because as long as you are a big TV buyer, you're going to go to a big six. So they're always going to have those clients. And the extent to which they can then upsell them more than media-related services is going to be limited if they don't invest in this change. And then the other thing is, it's like letting the fox in the hen house. So if you have these firms in there doing a great job and really making them happy on these kinds of tech and data consultancies, what's going to stop the advertiser from being like, oh, why don't you do everything else for me as well, since you do this so well? Or sometimes it ends up also becoming simpler, like, oh, it's just so many touch points, it's easier if I get one agency to handle this. And especially if they're very hungry, these firms, so they're constantly pitching their services, and they even do the media buying to such a different level, right? They do it where it's much more data powered, it's much more automated. They use machine learning to a greater extent, they get really good results. So that's the challenge, is you let the fox in the hen house, and then what's going to happen? And then the other challenge is, from a tech perspective, we are seeing more sophisticated advertisers and global brands deciding to own the technology themselves more and more. And so as they're starting to own the technology more and more, cost savings are not an issue, because they have their own rates established with the tech provider. So then on the digital side, at least, not TV, but on the digital side. So then they start thinking, okay, so if I'm doing, if I have owned the tech, I just need someone to execute for me and manage for me. In some cases, they want to do it themselves. It depends on the organization. And then that also then shrinks the role of the big six more and more. So right now, if you talk to someone very traditional, they'll say, no, I'm making margins off of media, and this is how I've always done it, and I'm a commodities business, and I'm happy with it. But the problem is, the more the work of an agency becomes commoditized, the less of what they do has value, and the more they have to move up the value chain to offer services and consulting. And if they decide not to, then you think about it, their work is not going to be so interesting as well. So then the talent that they're able to retain and attract, that's going to be further impacted. Because if you're a smart person, an educated person, and you want to work in a media agency, you need to be challenged, you need to have interesting work, you need to feel like it's going to evolve. But if it ends up being media buying, all without any added, let's say, technological or data aspects to it, it might be less interesting to them. I'm just speculating as well.
No, but I think that's it triggered another line of thoughts for me, is that, and I'm wondering, I don't have any facts about it, but how many actually, fresh graduates are dreaming about working for an agency today, when there is so many growing cool technology companies who are startups. What I would say, what marketing agency used to be, a typical understanding of a startup is today. The startups that we can see around town, from Cafu and the rest. So we don't advertise them until they sponsor me, but that's as well. It's a position. How are you going to attract talent? Okay, we opened up into a completely other topic now as well. So
honestly, this is the topic I'm most passionate about. So I could talk about this forever. But I think definitely attracting talent is a big challenge for media agencies right now, and it could continue to be unless they really change. And I do see the forward-looking big six agencies thinking about this and trying to figure out how they can do it in an effective way. That's the thing, is I think, if maybe you're not thinking about joining a media agency as a fresh grad, and that's fine. Maybe people aren't thinking about it. But if media agencies can create the roles that are interesting and create kind of the culture that is going to improve retention, and go to those, fresh grads at career fairs or whatever they currently, everything now in COVID, I don't know what you can and can't do, but whatever, let's say, channels you have to reach these fresh grads in universities. I remember when I was in university, a lot of the big six agencies were advertising for different fresh graduate programs, designing those things in a way that you can go to people who studied engineering, and people who studied data science, and people who studied computer engineering, whatever it happens to be, who would never think of a media agency, or people who study business and finance, right? They wouldn't think of a media agency. This does not come naturally to them. And figuring out in a clever way, this is what agencies should be able to do, right? How can they then position their offering from an employer standpoint to these fresh grads in a way that's going to attract them? I don't have the answers right now, but it's something that we need to put a lot of thought into. And a lot of, let's say, evangelization needs to go around it, because if you do things in an interesting way, if you look at some of the work that the specialist firms do, the Merkels, the Jellyfishes, the incubators, the kind of work they do is quite interesting. And it would be interesting to an engineer. It would be interesting to someone who, is into statistics, analysis of any kind. So if you just make it clear to them that, this is what you could do. This is the impact you actually have on the advertiser. Because I think having these disparate campaigns where I ran a campaign and I got this many impressions and this is the click-through rate and yay, this is not going to be rewarding anymore, right? So at a certain stage, it's did I actually have an impact on my advertiser's business? If you don't care about that, then there's another story. But I feel especially fresh grads, they come out of college wanting to have an impact on the ecosystem, on their market, on their clients, and making sure you position the kind of roles you have in agencies as something where there is actually something really rewarding out of it.
No, yeah, I couldn't agree more. So my last question for you would be, what would you say are the next 3 moves for the agencies of today who need to change and transform?
The next 3 moves. There's so many though. How do I choose? I would say, for me, one of the most important things, and it's a really big focus for my team, is measurement. And this is what's really going to crack a lot of different sectors. If you can have an offering around measurement where you're able to bring, let's say, business goals or objectives and translate them into the digital world where you have KPIs that you're tracking that actually have direct impact on the client's business in a way where you are doing this analysis on a regular basis, the client has access to this analysis, can make decisions in real time. This is really like where you are going to be indispensable, because you have brought together like so much information and so many insights in real time to your client that will have immediate impact on their business. And it could be like, that's the immediate impact. It could also be future looking. So being able to build an analytics around propensity modeling, around lifetime value analysis and things like that, that really get results. So we've seen it, that really has results. So I think this is a space that's really important, because at the end of the day, the big 6, they have creative agencies. So they create the creatives, they do the buying. While they do the buying, they then collect a lot of data that's just naturally being collected and in lots of cases never looked at. Makes my heart break, but this happens a lot. And it's sitting there, right? So if you can then couple this with an effective measurement framework that you've developed for your clients, that then everything flows together and then delivers those insights, imagine how indispensable you are at that point, right? So for me, I would say measurement is critical. The second piece I would say is very important, and it's been a pain point of ours for a long time, is creative. The way creative is approached within Big 6 is like big ideas, it's fantastic, it's amazing, but they don't bring technology and data into the ideation process. Mm-hmm. And the number of opportunities you lose out on because you don't do that really is frustrating and almost irresponsible, I would say. So there's everything you do should be driven by data. And we go to our clients, and the media agency in lots of cases, let's say they do a great job in lots of cases, right? So they have the setup, they collect the data, and everything is done perfectly. What does the actual consumer see? They see the creative. If the creative is not personalized and is not powered by any of the data, yeah, you'll get some results because maybe you're reaching the right audience versus not the right audience, but then you're reaching them maybe with like a very bland or let's say vanilla creative that is the same mass creative that everyone sees. That's where you miss out on some opportunities. So I think figuring out this problem around creative. Now, the problem with this is it's not profitable. So, or at least agencies have not figured out the way to make it profitable. And so they'd rather work with partners, which is fine. But it's absolutely fine to work with partners. We have some excellent partners in the market that are doing this very well. I don't see a lot of Big 6 investing in their own services, except maybe one that comes to mind that has done a good job of investing in building their own services around data-driven creative. But what I still feel is missing is how do you bring that kind of knowledge of tech and data and insights that you're deriving from the data into the ideation process. This, I would say, is another move. Figure it out. This needs to happen. And then the third thing I would say for me, the most important, and I think I talked about this a lot, probably like most of this discussion has been around this, is figure out your talent management. So figure out how do you manage your talent, figure out your recruitment strategy, figure out how to get the right profiles into your organization, because that's really how you're going to make anything work. So by the way, I have like a huge list. Those are the ones, I picked off the top of my head. So I would say those are the key areas.
No, for sure. I mean, you need to start somewhere. Obviously, when you're going through any type of transformational program, there is a lot of things that you need to cover if you truly want to transform, but you need to start somewhere, and I think this is super valuable. Nourah, thank you for the conversation. I think
that, just to point on this, I think also these are doable. They're doable.
Exactly.
But like other things I didn't mention, like structural changes, those are difficult to do. These are totally doable.
So it's more about doing than talking, obviously.
Yes, that's another. I love that you mentioned this, because the biggest frustration in my job is when you go and everyone's like, yeah, this is great, we're going to do it, and then nothing happens. That's like the worst thing. So don't, definitely take the time to do the analysis as well internally. So understand what are the different areas that you could delve into from a services perspective. So is it analytics? Is it around creative? Is it around cloud? What is the area you want to build out your business on? Do a cost benefit analysis to understand, like, is building it better than partnering? Should I partner? Should I build? How do I do it? Do a proper analysis, then make the decision. But once you make the decision, then commit to that decision and really have the KPIs in place, track progress, celebrate successes, and make sure there's a proper culture change program to make the whole organization accept this change.
And if you need anyone to come in and raise the energy in the room for something like this, call Noura, because she raised my energy here in 1 hour.
About this, I'm sorry.
So if you need someone going around offices and just explaining everyone that they need to move, they better move. So I think it's awesome. I love it. I love it. Noura, thank you so much for the conversation. It was really inspiring, and I really do hope that we uncovered and we mentioned some important topics to be discussed in the future. Obviously, we could sit here and talk for hours, but we also want to send some messages across and record something that people will actually listen to the end, So maybe we can schedule an episode 2. But for now, I think we sent across a huge message, and I hope that everyone who listened to this episode will enjoy it. Please leave comments, because that's helping us to be better, and it's going to help us also think in a better way. We're going to make sure that we reply and that we give our opinions after you share comments with us. If you like what we do with the Change podcast, please like and subscribe, share this episode with your family and friends, and stay tuned until next Monday, when we are releasing another episode of the Change podcast. Noura, thank you again. I loved our episode, and I hope that I'll see you in another one, maybe in a year, let's say, to recap.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have a lot more successes to celebrate at that point.
Exactly. Thanks for coming one more time. Thank you everyone for staying with us until the end. Have a good day and see you next Monday.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.